I met Russell through Simon Martin on the phone a few months ago, I think 3 months ago, and have been very impressed with Russell's drive and determination to get this project up and running with Rotary, and for which he should be congratulated. So I don't know Russell directly, but I understand that him and his wife Deborah have been going to Nepal many times over the last 50 years, and are very attached and intimately involved with the country. They've gone trekking there, as they've also raised money for rebuilding a school damaged in the 2015 earthquake, and provided computers for the students to use. They've been involved in construction and financially supporting families in the area. Russell's been a teacher and a manager at TAFE NSW, an official visitor in New South Wales jails, and a casual cave guide at Genoan Caves. Him and his wife Deborah live in Medlow, Bath, and support many things, including Thrive, Bushcare, Blackheath Scouts, and Medlow Bath Residents Association. And he's been an active member of Rotary in Cootamundra and Lithgow. So on that note, Russell, I welcome you to the club and to your first presentation of your project, which we look forward to supporting and hearing about over the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernard. It's very interesting to be back with Rotary after so many years. And I recall with some disappointment that Simon is not with us today. When I first started in Rotary, I think the fines were 20 cents. It then became $1. When I went to visit relatives in America, the minimum was in fact $10,000. So I would encourage the Sergeant at Arms to get a suitable fine from Simon Martin for not being present today. So let me tell you a bit about the project in Nepal. Okay, so we're talking about the Phortse Clean Water Project. Phortse is one of the small villages on the way to Mount Everest. And because it's not right on the trail, it isn't as big or as well. My technical assistant is spoiling my presentation at this particular point. Can you that's better, just leave it at that.
She's going to start the slideshow because they're seeing the side bits.
Right, okay. This is
doesn't.
So can you see it well enough?
Yeah, it's all good.
Without the key statements, I don't know what that is all about. So Phortse itself is a Sherpa village, and it's at 3,840 meters. So it's a pretty cold place in winter, and that's the time of year that we've always been in Nepal, probably because being a teaching family, it was when the holidays were longest, but it also is a time of year when the climate is cold but clear, much better than being there in the middle of a humid monsoon season. So the population is only 4,500 people, and the income, which is the significant point, comes from trekking, where the men and the women sometimes work as guides or porters. And also, you would have seen from that early photo, there are fields. So the agriculture is vital in the summer period. So the water that we're talking about is used for households, for trekker accommodation as an income producing source, and also for agriculture. Now, I just need to move this a bit so that you can. Can you see the whole thing?
Yeah, we can see that.
Right, okay. So in the 2015 earthquake, the main water source dried up and their reserve tank was damaged so that it no longer held water. So in the winter colder period, water was still available near the village, but in summer, it was only available from the river way down in the valley below. And there was insufficient water available for them to continue to offer accommodation in the village for trekkers, and impossible to do agriculture. We actually stayed in Phortse a few years ago, and it was after the 2015 earthquake, but it was a pretty scary event when we actually experienced one of the follow-up quakes. And we really had no idea whether the building that we were in was going to collapse around us or not. And I can now tell you that in fact it didn't. So the way things are divided up in Nepal, it's not uncommon for the women to be the bearers of the water, and they obviously have to spend hours going to get it. They have the 20-litre, larger or smaller, jerry cans of water, and they carry those on their backs. Right, okay. Action for Nepal was approached by the local committee of, what is that one here? Was replaced by the local Phortse Water Committee and also the local government. Now the photo there is of Lakpa Thiering Sherpa handing over a check or receiving a check from the person that I can't see, but I hope you can. So Action for Nepal is an organisation headed up by Lakpa Sherpa, his wife Jangmu Sherpa, who's a fully trained doctor, and she did some of her training in community health here in Australia. They are very successful, high-performing, community-centric, building healthy, educated communities. And they believe in doing things once and doing it properly. And the areas that they work in are health, education, literacy, drinking water, and more recently with the COVID situation, they've been providing food for communities that have no food, because in the particular community that they've been working with lately, 90% of the income is derived from tourism. And of course, with COVID, that tourism income has dried up completely. So the Action for Nepal, or AFN, have had significant experience in planning and designing and constructing very successful water supply systems, in particular in Lukla and a couple of other Sherpa villages. Now, what they put forward for Phortse is to have the intake high up in the mountains so that it's away from humans and animals. There would be the technical stuff of interruption chambers with filtration and reservoir tanks. The important thing, because the village is so high, is the frost-resistant piping, because otherwise it just freezes in the winter. Community taps, fire hydrants, 10 off-takes for the irrigation, and each household would also have a tap. And it will, when it's completed, be the highest water supply system anywhere in Nepal. And so it can be a model for the future. So the income that they have achieved so far has been raised by the villagers, and I've put in bold there the Australian equivalent, because the Nepalese rupees is it's a meaningless figure. So 17,000 has been raised by the village, and that is actually a pretty significant figure for a very small village like Phortse. Rotary in Scotland donated 76,000 for a small project which was going to just provide water for the taps in the villages, but it wouldn't include enough for agriculture, and it certainly didn't have any intention of providing taps for firefighting. The local government offered 58,000 in Australian dollars. Terry Trevino is an American fellow who donated the materials, that is the special piping that's needed and will be used in the high altitude of Phortse. Terry Trevino is associated with the climbing centre, which is in Phortse itself. And that's the thing that the village has become quite well known. It's sometimes called the Summiters Village because so many of the men living in Phortse have been porters and guides, and in some cases summited Everest, if not once, at least several times. Then they got another 11,000 from CED, but the goal for us in this case is around 70,000. If I'd done this slide a few days ago, it would have been a different figure because the exchange rate is constantly changing. Now, Bernard mentioned that we have in the past raised money for rebuilding a school in another village and also for the provision of laptop computers. The first computers that the students in that school would ever have come in contact with. And that amounted to something around $20,000. So the goal of about 70,000 is very much larger, and that's why we're asking Rotary for help. And I'd like to thank Bernard for his help in getting the Rorke's registration through. So there has been progress already. The frost-resistant piping has been ordered, and I saw a photo of helicopters delivering it. If they don't use the helicopters, everything has got to be carried up to the village by humans, on the back of porters, or in some cases, donkeys, or for the higher part, yaks. So what you can see there is one of the village taps that's already being constructed. The whole project is hopefully going to be completed by February next year. So the Australian goal of $70,000, my wife and I have already, with a friend, have already raised $5,000 from a film screening and donations. And I'll just deviate a little bit here to explain. My friend Michael Dillon and I first went to Nepal back in 1972-73 because Michael was making his first film of a trek in Nepal, Himalayan journey, and that can be actually found on the internet if you want to follow it. But the one that he's put out this time is a story about Hillary and his expedition from the ocean up to the sky. And there were parts of it that were never made public before. Michael has recently remade the film, and it's been touring around in COVID times at different screenings. So he very generously allowed all the income from that screening in Mount Victoria to go into this project. So we're also hoping to get philanthropic donations, and that's why we're particularly grateful to have that tax deductibility status through Rorke's. Rotary Sydney might choose to give us a helping hand, and hopefully we will also get some other suggestions for ways in which we may be able to raise the money. So the project, the benefits are going to be really significant. It's going to provide a reliable year-round water supply because the water intake is high up in a nearby mountain valley. There's going to be 1 tap per household, 6 taps in the village for community use, water for firefighting, which, given that all the cooking is done either on fires or Kero Primus type stoves, fire is an ever-present risk. And in the summer months, it means that there will also be water for agriculture. And then the final thing, water supply to the schools, and I'll come back to that later on. So the economic benefits will be a reliable water supply to provide accommodation for trekkers. The water supply in the village will save many hours each day. And those hours, which were normally done by the women, they'll be able to undertake income-producing activities. And this is actually what's happened in other villages where the water supply has been installed by Action for Nepal. And then girls will also be able to attend the schools regularly. In a country like Nepal, where health and hygiene are not widely understood, the girls would often stay at home for a week each month with proper toilets and access to clean water. They will be able to continue with their schooling every day, and there will also be improved hand washing and personal hygiene for all the students. So improved economic potential for the village, improved health and hygiene for adults and children, improved accommodation standards for trekkers, improved economic futures for women and girls, and I think that's a very important aspect. Improved education potential for the girls, that goes hand in hand with that one, and improved agricultural potential so that they can maintain their food supply for the year. And it will become a model project for Nepal. So the people of Nepal extend their thanks to Rotary in Scotland, to Terry, who has already procured the specialised piping that's needed, for Action for Nepal that I've already spoken about, the Nepalese government who've allocated funds, Rotary Sydney, and specifically Simon Martin, Merv Williams, Bernard McLeod, and also Kathy Tate for allowing me to make this presentation today. So I think now if I hand it back, people may like to answer questions, and I'll just
Thank you very much, Russell. Russell, I'd like to invite members to make their own or present their own questions, but there are a couple that have been asked, which I'll ask on behalf of others who will be asking their own questions. I have one from Glenn and one from Bruce, and I'll just combine the both. Once completed, how sustainable will the installation be? Will external support, either finance or skills, be needed? And what are the plans for ongoing maintenance of the new water system?
Okay, I have seen in action the water supply system for the village of Lukla, which some of you may have heard about. It's where people fly in before they start their trek to Everest. The system there is pretty low maintenance, but part of the project will be training, I think it's usually 2 people in the village, to be able to do the maintenance that's required. The system that's to be installed, the piping will be underground to help insulate it from the cold weather. There isn't expected to be abnormal maintenance required, but we can't guarantee that there won't be another earthquake or some other catastrophe that may be unexpected but might cause a problem. The village have already been paying into a fund, and that's how the 17,000 would have been raised, and they will continue to pay into that fund to provide a source of funds for any maintenance that does need to be required in the future. Did I
Thank
answer?
you, Russell. That's wonderful. I'm sure it's answered quite a few questions, actually.
Hi there, Russell. Thank you for a great talk, and it's so informative and very inspiring. Now, this may be a bit of a controversial question, but having come from a country that has its fair share of cold climates, I know what's welcome is sometimes hot water. And I was just curious, insofar as what the next generation would be. Are there any plans to provide or add on some hot water facilities for the community?
Not that I know of. The supply of hot water is usually up to individual households. At the moment, they would be carrying the water back to the house and heating it over either a wood-fired stove, or in higher altitudes, they often use yak dung as the fuel source. Or they also do use kerosene primus type things. Lower down, there is, they use solar hot water. But at this altitude, I don't know whether the lodges may have solar hot water facilities in there. When we were there, it was winter, and I don't recall being aware of any hot water being available. I won't tell you how many days we went without a shower.
Okay, Mark, President Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. I remember talking to you, Terry Carson, about why you were building schools for the people in the mountain areas of Afghanistan. And Terry told me that he just fell in love with the people up there. If you remember that, Terry, 15 years ago or something. I think that's the reason why you did that. But Russell, I'm wondering, why Nepal? Why these people? What is it that's sort of driving your passion for this project and I guess for the Action for Nepal group?
Well, very similar to what your friend found. It's the people that we've fallen in love with, as well as the country. To have a holiday in Nepal, you get lots of exercise, that's for sure, because there's lots of walking, lots of steps, and so on. But it's also the people that you walk with. And because it's a holiday, we always have a guide or two. And we also have some porters to carry our luggage, because even though we're strong and reasonably fit Australians, we aren't able to cope as easily with the altitude as the locals there. In the early days, when the treks were camping treks, we would have sometimes 80 Sherpas and 80 porters and a dozen Sherpas to wait on us Saabs, as they were called. Nowadays, we stay in lodges or tea houses. We still have a few porters. We, in our last trek, took our family for the very first time, and the 20 and 30-year-olds were at first uncomfortable with the thought of using porters, but it is far better regulated now. They carry a maximum amount. They are all covered by insurance, and it means that for the Westerners, they get to carry what they need during the day, but the money goes back out into the communities. Unlike if you fly in somewhere or helicopter in, then the money goes to a big company. So that's why we still use porters, and the Nepalese people by nature are extraordinarily friendly and generous, Hindus and Buddhists, and part of it is getting to know them, their culture and their religions. There we are.
That's absolutely wonderful. One more question. Anyone like to ask one more question, please?
Russell, thank you so much for that. I remember traveling in Nepal more than 30 years ago, and it was one of my favorite experiences of my life. I can well understand why you're so enamored of the place. My question is something that you touched on a moment ago. Seeing that this little village is on the way to Everest, and knowing that people pay shocking amounts of money to climb Everest, it seems to me that one person climbing Everest would pay more than it would take to cover this entire project. So where does the money go? And why is it that so much money gets poured into Nepal from these trekkers and so little of it is coming back to these people?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, Phortse is not on the direct route. You can go via Phortse to get to Everest Base Camp, but not all of the groups do. The pictures that you've probably seen or heard about, where there's a continuous long line of climbers going up the side of Everest, they pay thousands of dollars. Might be 60 odd thousand American dollars per person, more or less. Now, the majority of that goes to the company that organizes the climbing to cover the insurance, and also the Nepalese government, who has a fee for climbers as well. Then they would also be paying the Sherpas, whether they're high altitude Sherpas or whether they're porters to the base camp. If you've seen any of the films that are out around lately, you would know that those Sherpas have not always been well treated. Their generosity, their dedication has been taken advantage of, and they are now organizing themselves, and they will sometimes say, no, we're not going to do it under these circumstances because it is too risky. Now, by contrast, if you go trekking, which is what the sort of things all of you might be able to do, and I'm going to try and talk Simon Martin into doing, it's a small group. I used to take up to 20 people. Nowadays, it's more like 10 with 3 or 4 porters and a guide or 2. And we stay in the local villages, in the tea houses, in the lodges. So again, what we pay, which is not a lot of money, gets spread out into the communities. So the question that you're asking is, where does all the thousands of dollars from the climbers go? It goes into the companies that organize it, and also the Nepalese government. The Sherpas would get some, and they would bring that back to their villages, but it's not spread out to the same extent as what the trekkers do.
Can I just quickly ask a question? Jeff, you're on mute, by the way. Unless somebody else has a question, I don't want to jump in, but Action for Nepal, Russell, that's an organisation rather than just a name, I presume. What's the sort of background to that entity, as it were?
Okay, well, it's actually got an interesting background from my point of view, because on my first trek, the cook who was on the trek happened to be the father of Lakpa, and he saved up money to build a house for the family, went down to the village where the bank was to withdraw the money, and was actually murdered by the Khampas, the insurgents that were coming in from China in the early days. Now, I've reconnected with Lakpa. He is the founder and CEO of Action for Nepal. He was actually a pop star in Nepal without a mask on. He's good looking, has an excellent singing voice, and plays a mean guitar. But what he realized was that there was an enormous amount of need. And so he changed his life from being an entertainer to a person that set up Action for Nepal and does take on these projects, such as the school rebuilding and so on that we've been involved with. They're distributing food to communities at the moment under COVID. They take a percentage, but I've seen where they live and how they live, and the amount that is being taken is a reasonable amount, considering the amount of time and effort that they put into not just in supervising the projects, but actually keeping in touch with people like myself and people in Switzerland or America that will be able to raise money on their behalf. So the Nepalese government is somewhat corrupt, and the money that goes in on taxes is not always widely distributed amongst the communities. And that's why people like Action for Nepal, who bring not just an organisation, but the expertise to make sure that the money is well spent and the projects are properly completed and won't just fall over in a year or two.
Well, Russell, and thank you very much for that. And I think it's time now to bring our wonderful meeting to a close, but I'm charged with thanking you for your presentation today. And my first visit was to Nepal in 1979, and what an interesting time it was then. And I was amazed when I was trekking the Annapurnas that the whole area is like a pedestrian highway for so many people in so many tribal groups, all the beautiful dress that you see changing from one every 100 meters or so. So it was quite amazing. But I noticed that you live in Milabarthe, which must acclimatise you for your visits to the Himalayas, and no doubt you drop into the Hydro Majestic for a coffee and a morning tea from time to time, which is so wonderful. I had a wonderful dinner there just recently. Your wonderful slides and photos really speak 1,000 words to us, and we just have been absolutely enthralled. And I was very privileged to actually fly over the top of Mount Everest in Royal Nepal Airlines back then when they were in existence. They're not any longer called Royal Nepal Airlines, but first class was with straps. And what a wonderful view! What a wonderful view of the summit of Mount Everest. Absolutely wonderful. And until you've been there, you don't really know what a joyful experience it is. And only we who've been so lucky to go to Kathmandu and Pokhara can really appreciate what you were saying in so many different ways. And we just invite everybody to join you maybe on one of your future projects there. The Clean Water Project is just so necessary in such a place, and such a small investment goes so far in a place like Nepal, because the Rotarians are very busy up there, very energetic, and especially their youth, I've noticed. And when you go into Facebook, you see the work that they're doing, and just such achieving kids, in teenagers and young adults. Your address today will generate $100 to the Rotary Foundation, and we're most appreciative of your visit today, and we hope you'll stay a friend of the Rotary Club of Sydney, and I'm sure we're going to look at ways and means of assisting you in your wonderful work. And congratulations for all that you do and have done. And I'd just like to thank you again on behalf of all members of Rotary Club of Sydney. Thanking you.